ENA Dream Barbecue is about nothing would be an inaccurate statement. When looking at art, especially very abstract pieces, I think it's quite misleading to look at what the art is trying to tell you, and we should rather focus our attention on what we get out of it. That's what we'll be doing today, friends. I'll be decoding ENA Dream Barbecue, sure, but more so, I'll be giving you my personal perspective on this game that, on the surface, seems to make very little sense. So, if you're ready, I think it's time we dive headfirst into the bizarre reality of the titular ENA. The story of ENA is vast, and while I won't be discussing the web series in this video, which is a personal favorite of mine I may cover someday, even just the video game story is, well, it's complicated, nuanced. And I believe the best framework to absorb this story through is with guilt. There's an obsession with the boss throughout the story. I mean, basically every character you talk to claims to be the boss, and the entire mission of the game series seems to be to eventually kill the boss. Now, I could tackle this concept of the boss through a couple of different scopes, or I could seemingly gloss completely over it. I mean, how important is it really? This is an absurd game. They're just saying absurd things. And if you think that way, I think you are misled. Because when sitting down to create a piece of art, it's essentially impossible to not have intention behind it. And while that intention is not the end-all be-all, nor is it more important than personal interpretation, what it does tell us is that each line has a purpose. It has intention. And to properly describe to you what I believe all these bosses are, I'll have to tell you my general understanding of the story. I found it odd that most characters know ENA by name, and they pronounce it a million different ways. And while the opening sequence suggests this is a dreamlike world where it seems possible everyone would know her, it still doesn't quite explain why, for instance, the vending machine simply won't offer ENA his services. He refuses her. And this sequence in particular is interesting, as it shows ENA surrounded by bullets, saying she isn't doing what they all would seemingly naturally assume she is doing. This is a common trend in the game, a general dislike for ENA from a lot of the characters. And by the sequence I mentioned, we can pretty much guess why. ENA is a war veteran, or at the very least, some kind of combatant, whether that be an official war or a revolutionary soldier. And similar to Vietnam, many still, even to this day, look down on soldiers, or even outright hate them. And listen, I hate militarization too, but I don't hate soldiers. My personal politics aside, it remains a fact that many hold intense grudges against combatants themselves. We can assume that in this world, some war did happen, and that many died on both sides. Perhaps, and it seems honestly pretty likely, ENA was a particularly important soldier, and perhaps the people she is interacting with had loved ones killed by her side, even by her own hands. Or maybe this is all happening inside of her own head. So if we were to assume she is a soldier of some kind, it would seem she has strained herself out and gotten a respectable job. Is what I would say, but not only does it seem unlikely she is doing something completely dissimilar to war tactics, hence the whole kill the boss thing, but it seems like she is doing something some would call even more heinous. Instead of outright war where mostly soldiers have to die, she is doing something not dissimilar from organizations like the CIA, taking out certain groups or leaders at the behest of her own country, which often cites civil wars and such. Civilians at the hands of the violence. And even aside from all that, she simply seems dissatisfied with her new line of work. And I'm not completely against the whole bathroom metaphor being set around the concept that she is so overworked that she literally doesn't even have time to use the bathroom. But it also kind of seems like a shallow interpretation, so I'll leave it up to you to debate about it in the comments. So, ENA is a former soldier with a new job. What does it have to do with bosses everywhere? Well, this is where my apparent specialty, mental illness, comes into play. For some background, in case you're unfamiliar with me, I have schizoaffective disorder bipolar type. I also have a vast knowledge of mental disorders as a whole. And this concept of there are enemies everywhere, all around me, is not only rather common with those with mental disease, but also with war vets. And of course, the two can often go hand in hand. It's unclear as to what causes mental illness, but a good place to start thinking about it more deeply is with stress. It can cause, to put it simply and kind of cutely, a lot of ruckus in the brain, which may result in things common with soldiers like PTSD or even complex PTSD. Stress then causes dissociation as a coping mechanism. The brain literally cannot handle what is happening in front of its eyes, so it hides away. And as the body experiences trauma, the mind, shying away from it, creates a fracture in the mind-body structure. I mean, it's no coincidence, at least I don't think, that Nina's body is literally a fractured mess. This is the general basis, at least I believe, of dissociation, which I also believe is the root cause of virtually every mental illness out there, maybe not depression though, but at the very least psychotic disorders. I explained why in my Explaining Away Psychosis video, and will be explaining much more extensively in the future. The concept of strangers are out to get me is not really an uncommon thought. Many people, especially susceptible people like women, already have these thoughts occurring in their heads because of society and other people. However, when it comes to psychosis, it really depends on how much you latch onto and buy into those thoughts, and especially how deep the thought goes. Sure, having the initial thought is relatively normal, but then going on and having a spawn-off thought of, my entire family has been replaced by the CIA and is out to kill me, well, if you have that thought, I would suggest getting checked out by a professional. ENA seems to have more of the latter, and it's important to note that it's not direct, but rather the events of the game are a mirror for the real ENA's mind. All the characters saying or even believing they may be the big boss is simply a reflection of ENA thinking that way about the people around her. At least that's my interpretation of things. Okay, so ENA is a soldier with probable mental illness, but which exact illness does she have? And, well, we simply just don't have the answer for that. Even in the web series, the common answer has been bipolar based on her mood swings. But that's not really how bipolar works. Even for me, a person who has extremely rapid cycling episodes, part of my schizoaffective disorder, my mania depressive episodes simply don't work like that. And not even just terms of frequency of switch, but rather how it presents itself in the first place. ENA showcases extreme shifts in mood specifically, while with bipolar, while that can happen, it's more so a shift in overall outlook and frame of mind. For example, while ENA goes from happy to sad at the drop of a hat, I would instead go from content to I am literally God. And of course, I realize the schizo half of my diagnosis plays a big part in this, that delusional self, but my grander point here is that ENA has more of a switch in simple emotions, such as happy or sad, while I would, if I were to suddenly switch, go from something like ambivalent to despair. And the distinction here is important. While simple emotions are influenced more so by hormones, complex emotions are more controlled by a various combination of things. But first and foremost, thoughts. Schizoaffective disorder, or bipolar disorder for that matter, is primarily a thought disorder, while something like borderline personality disorder, sorry about that, is more emotionally based. Of course, thoughts can come from emotions, but the main difference here is that with bipolar and complex emotions, the thought comes first, then the emotion. With BPD and simple emotions, the emotion comes first, and the thought spawns off of that. It's more a battle between hormones and thoughts, and certainly not in the bullshit way of women are more emotional and less capable of complex thoughts. They shouldn't be leaders. Even though women are more susceptible to BPD. Obviously, women are still capable of complex thoughts and emotions. I feel like I don't have to tell my audience that. But when you have BPD, it's simply a case of the hormone directly influencing the emotions as opposed to the thought directly influencing the emotion. But, of course, it's all very nuanced, and each person is their own and has their own experiences. I am also, dear God, not a medical professional, so do not take my word as law. And I'm also a man, so my thoughts on women don't mean anything. But as a quick aside, most medical research is done on men specifically, so the data we have is rather biased and unbalanced. And more work needs to be done to analyze the biomedical nature of women specifically. We cannot simply write women off as more emotional or hormonal and call it a day. We need to narrow our focus and really question why, and even if, BPD is actually more common in women as opposed to men. So no, I don't think ENA is bipolar disorder in really any way, shape, or form, and that it would be more accurate to say she may experience some level of BPD. Even aside from the simple emotion slip up more typically seen with BPD, which is thought to be primarily caused by issues in actual brain structure, as opposed to neurotransmitters, although the research may be out of date, I'm not really sure, some other things line up. BPD is often caused by extreme stress or trauma, which would make sense if ENA were, say, a former soldier. And a quick overnote here, obviously schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, or bipolar disorder, really any mental disorder, can be caused by extreme stress or trauma, but BPD is, to my knowledge at least, much more heavily linked to that. Adding on to this, the psychosis that is sometimes experienced by those with BPD is usually caused by, again, stress. This is opposed to the more randomness of, for example, schizophrenic psychosis or bipolar psychosis, where it more or less just kinda happens. Psychosis with BPD often has a more solidified reasoning for occurring, and thus a more consistent theme. If ENA were a war veteran, for example, it would make sense that she could develop both borderline personality disorder and also develop delusions specifically centered around the fact that, for a period in her life, there literally were enemies all around her. I could also kind of see an interpretation that says ENA has DID, or dissociative identity disorder, but honestly, I would see that as a rather shallow example of the disorder herself in a game that is quite nuanced and complex. Okay, so we've established a couple of things about the story of ENA Dream BBQ. ENA is probably a war veteran, and ENA most likely has some level of BPD. Cool. But what is the game trying to actually say about all of these things? Are they simply just salad dressing for a purely bizarre experience that tries and give it artistic merit where there otherwise is only abstraction? Well, I just don't think so. Guilt. It's something that consumes us. That makes us not even just not want to forgive ourselves, but not think we're capable of salvation in the first place. Throughout the entire game, there are little glimpses that ENA is looking for forgiveness, that she hates herself. When you first encounter the giant porta potty, she even outright says she hates herself. But this certainly all culminates with a secret encounter with the true genie of the Lonely Door. And for that, I'll just let the scene play out for you here.
Συγχαρητήρια που φτάσατε στο μπάνιο. Είμαι εγώ η Θοδώρα, το τζίνι αυτών των χωρών. Όλες οι αμαρτίες σας έχουν πλέον ξεχαστεί. Ανεβείτε στην τουαλέτα του κότς και σκουπίστε τις ενοχές από το πρόσωπό σας, αγαπημένε άγγελε. Περίμενε ένα, στάσου είσαι ασυγχωριστός. Η δουλειά μου εδώ τερματίστηκε. Don't you dare hang up that phone! Θα παραδεχτώ ότι θαυμάζω το αφελές κουράγιο σου. Θα σου χαρίσω μια φιλοδοξία, εντάξει, τίποτα περισσότερο. Τι επιδιώκεις, τι είδους ζωή θέλεις να ζήσεις. Πες μου τις φιλοδοξίες σου. Δεν μπορείς να αλλάξεις τη φυσική τάξη των πραγμάτων. Δεν μπορείς να επιδιώκεις περισσότερα από όσα είσαι ικανός. Όχι. Καμία τιμωρία, ακριβώς όπως κανείς δεν χρειάζεται να τιμωρηθεί επειδή γεννήθηκε, εκτός από εσένα φυσικά.
Dear Genie, your boss is our target today, but the smoke is in the way of our business. Would you kindly get rid of it at once?
Τι ακριβώς είναι αυτό για έναν στόχο? Γνωρίζεις καν τα συστατικά αυτής της λεκτικής σαλάτας? Το μυαλό σου φαίνεται να έρχεται σε σύγκρουση με τα γράμματα που φτύνει. Οι ανησυχίες και οι φόβοι θα προδώσουν μόνο τους αλήθινους σου στόχους. Ένα. Μέσα σε αυτό το πηγάδι θα βρεις τη ρίζα του πόνου σου, την ίδια την πηγή αυτού του καπνού. Προχώρα. Θυμήσου ένα, το μόνο που χρειάζεται είναι το σωστό μέρος και το σωστό φαγητό.
There is no chance at happiness, bliss, or even forgiveness. All there is to get rid of the smoke. The next mission. Ina subconsciously falls back in what she knows best. War. After all, after everything you've done, do you truly expect to ever be forgiven? Do you honestly expect to live a happy, fulfilling life, Ina? Please. I could laugh. Some great games are about this guilt. Amori is the first that comes to mind, and while I won't spoil that game here, I think Ina comes closer in terms of conceptual presentation. Mouthwashing is another, although the characters in question are completely different. I feel guilty too, over a lot of things. But the best example is what I gave in my hazy mind analysis, which I will include here. I get fleeting glimpses of that joy during my rapid cycling manic episodes. They feel great, honestly, but I know I'm a dangerous person to myself and maybe even others when they happen. I will sacrifice my happiness in every timeline if it means I won't have to hurt anyone. During those moments, life, what little I have left, becomes completely and utterly inconsequential. I am God, and me crashing my car into a pole means nothing more to me than a funny joke. A legitimately hilarious one, in fact. But I don't want to start knocking on neighbors' doors. I don't want to scare them. Dear viewer, I don't want to hurt anyone. And yet, I do anyway. Today at work, I separated the last 2 pennies in the register, giving one to a customer and one remained. Alone. I could hear her cries of pain and anguish echoing in my head. Today at work, I had to throw away food. And that seems completely normal. I understand that. But to me, as someone who believes inanimate objects have sentience, you have to understand that, to me, that is the equivalent of murdering someone. A real person. And yet, I do it anyway, out of social obligation. I know I said earlier that I'm not a monster, but I lied. I am. I never told you this, Kaya, but they threw in my apron at work. They got me a new one. And today I found out we ran out of the one thing you would actually eat when I brought it home, the chocolate hazelnut banana cake. The signs are everywhere. around every corner. I knew you were going to leave before we even talked about it. I knew because I saw the signs. The radio told me that I don't deserve you, that I truly am a monster. I'm sorry. I really am. Quote over. Guilt is bad enough, but psychotic guilt may be worse, because it sticks with you even just a bit more. It transforms not just your worldview, but your world itself. Your complete reality is shaped and molded by the guilt you feel deep inside. It makes you want to stop. It makes you want to die. Suddenly, listening to the radio is not just enjoying music. Rather, it is the many voices reminding you of what a shitty, horrible person you are. But does it have to stay that way? I'm honestly not sure. I haven't gotten to that point yet. But if you are a military vet and you've experienced some of the guilt I'm talking about now, what I can say is that, well, it's not your fault. That it is the grander system and the leadership at the helm of it that's at fault. I think it's where I want to leave this video off with today. I'm sure I have much more to say with future chapters of ENA Dream Barbecue, so please, subscribe to hear more thoughts. And, as always, thank you for watching.